The recent trip I took to West Africa and my return were both reminders of how stark extreme poverty is, but also of how inspiring our work can be. Our first stop was in Senegal, to the city of Pikine, which is right next door to Dakar, and it's an area that's prone to frequent flooding. In 2010, the floods were much worse than usual. So Oxfam worked with our partner organization, EVE, to respond by providing cash transfers, hygiene kits and training, mosquito nets, water purification tablets, and the fuel for pumps. This is Aissatou Nyang, and she's a widow who has 9 children and lives here in Pikine with 30 people in her house, which was flooded in 2010. So she described to us how the water had flooded the home and completely covered the floor. And her household was identified as one of the most severely affected in the area. So she ultimately received all of the services that EVE provided. This is one of 116 motorized pumps for which Oxfam provided fuel to remove water from Pikine. 6 months later, and even with pumps like this running around the clock, some areas still had just enormous amounts of water left. And in some areas it was just completely full of debris and overrun with algae, and one of the things that stood out to me was the smell. It was just overpowering in some of the areas. This is an area that was a public square that had been used for community activities like religious events, dance, and sports prior to the flooding. In some locations throughout the city, people had set up these sandbag paths so that they could walk, or more realistically, probably hop between points that were otherwise impassable. This is a school that we visited, and I had to duck a bit to avoid hitting my head on the overhangs, and this was because over time they had built up the height of the ground to keep water from flooding into the classrooms. I had a glimpse of what day-to-day life is like for a lot of people in the area, and it's a reality that's totally different from mine. But what often stood out to me was not these differences, but the people and how inspiring they were. And they weren't complaining, they weren't helpless, they weren't bemoaning sort of how difficult the situation was. They were just doing what they had to on a daily basis, the same way that I do, or anyone else I know does, to face whatever sort of obstacles stand in our way.